2,847 LCVPs damaged in combat, shell hits, mine strikes, underwater obstacles, groundings, and collisions. Of these, 2,391 were repaired in forward areas using basic carpentry tools and returned to service within 48 hours. Only 456 boats were damaged badly enough to require return to a repair facility. The primitive plywood construction that naval architects mocked turned out to be survivable precisely because it was simple. A carpenter with a saw, hammer, and box of nails could fix a Higgins boat. A welder with a generator and steel plate could maybe fix a steel one if you had power, supplies, and time. On Pacific islands with no infrastructure maybe meant no. The Higgins boat's defining moment came on June 6, 1944, when 1,089 LCVPs carried the first wave of Allied troops onto the beaches of Normandy. The English Channel was everything Louisiana swamps were not. Deep, cold, rough, and defended by the most sophisticated coastal defenses ever built. The crossing was 12 mi through 4 to 6 FTCs in boats designed for short coastal hops. Naval experts predicted 30% wouldn't make it to the beach. Seasickness would incapacitate the troops who did. The flat-bottom boats would pound themselves apart in the waves, and the shallow draft would make them uncontrollable in wind. The reality was more complex and ultimately more impressive. Seasickness was endemic. Probably 80% of troops got violently ill on the crossing. The boats did pound brutally in the waves, making that distinctive slapping sound that veterans never forgot. Several swamped in the worst seas and had to be abandoned. But 92% of the first wave LCVPs reached their assigned beaches and discharged troops. Most made at least 2 more trips before the day ended. The boats that failed mostly fell victim to underwater obstacles. Belgian gates, Czech hedgehogs, and RML's asparagus that tore bottoms open. Even then, many kept running on sheer buoyancy until they could beach and unload. At Omaha Beach, where German defenses were strongest and casualties highest, Higgins boats provided the only successful element of a disastrous plan. The pre-landing bombardment had missed most German positions. The DD duplex drive tanks launched from landing ships sank in rough seas, leaving infantry without armored support. Troops landed in the wrong positions, disorganized and under murderous fire. But the boats kept coming, wave after wave. Every few minutes, more LCVPs drove onto the sand, dropped their ramps, and added more soldiers to the beach. The Germans could kill individuals, squads, even platoon. They couldn't stop the boats. Lieutenant John Spalding, Company E, 16th Infantry Regiment, landed at Omaha at 6:30 hours in rough seas under heavy fire. His after-action report captured the moment. We took fire from the cliffs while still 100 yards out. Saw 2 boats to our left get hit. Looked like 80s, our boat kept coming. The coxswain was magnificent. He drove straight through the obstacles. Felt the bottom scrape, revved the engine, and pushed us up onto the sand. Ramp went down. We were off in seconds. The boat reversed and was gone before the Germans could zero in. If that boat had stopped or hesitated, we'd all be dead. It didn't stop. That was the secret. The boats didn't stop. Individual boats got hit, caught fire, sank. Individual coxswains got killed, lost their nerve, turned back. But the fleet kept moving. The shallow draft let them push through obstacles. The flat bottom let them beach anywhere, not just on perfect gradients. The tunnel drive meant a propeller damaged by an obstacle usually kept turning. The plywood construction meant shell hits made holes, not catastrophic structural failures. And the desperate courage of 17- and 18-year-old coxswains, many of whom had never driven anything more complex than a pickup truck before the war, put those boats on the beach, regardless of danger. By nightfall on June 6th, LCVPs had landed 34,250 troops and 336 vehicles on 5 beaches across 50 mi of coastline. Total LCVP losses: 87 boats destroyed, 156 damaged but repairable. The failure rate was under 8%, far better than pre-invasion predictions. General Omar Bradley, commanding 1st Army, specifically credited the Higgins boat in his after-action report. Without the LCVP, the invasion would have been impossible. Every other element, naval gunfire, air support, airborne operations, was important but not decisive. The boats were decisive. They put infantry on the beach faster than the Germans could kill them. That margin made the difference between success and catastrophe. What made the Higgins boat work was a fundamental philosophical difference about what a military vessel needed to be. The Navy Bureau of Ships approached boat design as an exercise in optimization, balanced seaworthiness against cargo capacity, speed against fuel efficiency, protection against weight. Their designs were elegant compromises that performed well across multiple metrics. They were what engineers call optimal solutions. Andrew Higgins approached boat design as an exercise in problem solving for the worst case. Assume everything will go wrong. Build something that works anyway. His boats were terrible at dozens of things. They rolled in beam seas. They were slow, top speed of 12 knots loaded. They were uncomfortable, wet, cold, and miserable for passengers. They wasted fuel. They required constant maintenance. They were loud. They had terrible visibility from the coxswain's position. By every metric of naval architecture, they were mediocre boats. But they could do one thing better than any alternative: put infantry and equipment onto a hostile beach quickly, repeatedly, and survivably under fire. Everything else was secondary. The flat bottom that made them roll in seas also let them cross reefs and beach on any gradient. The exposed propeller that seemed vulnerable was actually easy to replace. A foreman crew could swap a damaged propeller in 30 minutes using a portable hoist and hand tools. The plywood construction that seemed fragile was actually damage-tolerant and field-repayable. The simple layout that seemed unsophisticated meant any competent boat operator could drive one with minimal training. Battlefields aren't laboratories. Combat doesn't happen under controlled conditions with maintenance crews standing by and favorable weather guaranteed. Combat happens in chaos with broken equipment, exhausted men, and situations nobody planned for. The Higgins boat was designed for chaos. It could be repaired with scrap lumber and bent nails. It could be operated by teenagers with 3 weeks of training. It could be built by furniture makers and carpenters. It could run with a damaged propeller, flooded compartments, and shell holes in the hull. It wasn't optimized. It was robust. This principle extended beyond the boat itself to the entire logistics chain. The LCVP required no special handling equipment. It could be loaded and unloaded from any cargo ship with a boom and cable. It required no special fuel. It ran on standard gasoline. It required no special spare parts. Propellers, plywood, and basic hardware were available anywhere. It required no special training infrastructure. Boat operators learned on the job, often during their first combat operation. It required no special maintenance facilities. Any beach with some tools and materials could serve as a repair depot. The contrast with German landing craft illustrated the difference in design philosophy. German MFPS marine fares were engineering marvels. Welded steel construction, diesel engines, armored hulls, and mounted weapons. They were sophisticated, capable vessels that required skilled crews, specialized maintenance, and substantial logistic support. They were objectively superior to Higgins boats by almost any engineering metric. But Germany produced perhaps 1,200 of them across the entire war, and losses were difficult to replace because production required shipyard facilities and specialized workers. The U.S. produced 23,398 LCVPs and could replace losses faster than combat could destroy them. Superior engineering lost to adequate mass production. By war's end, Higgins boats had participated in every significant amphibious operation in both theaters. They landed troops at Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Kwajalein, Saipan, Guam, Tinian, Pelu, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa in the Pacific. They landed troops at Sicily, Salerno, Anio, and southern France in the Mediterranean. They executed the landings at Normandy, the largest amphibious assault in history. They supported river crossings at the Rhine, the Seine, and dozens of smaller operations. Total personnel landed by LCVP, approximately 1.4 million troops. Total cargo landed, roughly 250,000 tons of vehicles and equipment. Total casualties suffered by